How are we feeling? Good?
Good. Yeah.
All right, let's get
Watch
started.
now. My thing is gonna ding for like the first time in forever.
I know.
Hopefully not. It shouldn't.
Oh, well, let's hope for the best. All right, welcome, Grasshoppers. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month. We're so excited to be running this webinar. We've got Julia, who's going to introduce herself on the webinar today. We're really just doing this to celebrate this month. I think it's such an important month. Mental Health Awareness Month was launched in 1945 just to really signify the importance of taking care of yourself, mental health, and the recovery from mental illness. So I think it's important that we celebrate this every month as a way of checking in with ourselves, to destigmatize mental illness, to think about how we can support our loved ones who may be going through some mental illness challenges, and also just to find out the ever-growing number of resources that are available to us. So Julie's going to talk about that in a second. So Alexa and I do not need an introduction, but Julia, you certainly do. We're so excited to have you on. Will you do us the honor of introducing yourself?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. But yeah, my name's Julia Belt. I am a mental health advocate. I'm a speaker, and I'm also the co-founder of two mental health companies. The first one is called Broglie Box, and the second one is called Veza. I know we're going to get into what those are, so I'll leave that to later. But I loved everything you said about Mental Health Awareness Month. We always say that every month is Mental Health Awareness Month, but in May, the rest of the world celebrates it. So very excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Of course. Sorry, just trying to get to the next slide, which it doesn't seem to want to do. There we go. So Julia, can you tell us a little bit about your story? I was so just blown away by everything that I read on your LinkedIn, and kind of learning about your trajectory here. So how do we go from chemical engineering to being an entrepreneur in the mental health space?
Yeah, so as you can probably predict, I wasn't expecting or anticipating on going into entrepreneurship. I never thought about having my own business or anything like that. I graduated high school, and my teachers were like, "You're really good at math and science. Maybe you should look into chemical engineering." And I honestly like didn't really even know what I wanted to do. And so I was like, I guess I'll just do this. I graduated in 2009 from high school, and at that point, like just figuring out like what's going to get me a job because the economy was so bad, I think was also in the back of my mind. And I really wanted to work in a skincare and cosmetic space. So I was like, oh, like what if I'm like a chemical engineer working for L'Oreal, for example? So that was like the goal whenever I was in college. And then I started working for Covestro. It was previously Bare Material Science, and I worked in ingredients. So I started in the lab, and then I started basically selling ingredients to the cosmetics and skincare industry. So I got my way in that way. And I would go to, I lived in Hoboken, New Jersey. I would go to all the major cosmetic manufacturers and contract manufacturers all over the East Coast, and be selling all basically the ingredients that go into all the products that we use today. And then I unfortunately, throughout this whole time, I should preface, had been struggling with my mental health, and never really spoke openly about it, and never really did anything to help myself because I was so deeply embarrassed about what I was going through. I now know there was nothing to be embarrassed about, but at the time, just deep personal stigma, and felt like it was a personal weakness. And then I was working at Covestro, and unfortunately, my brother Justin died by suicide, and that was 2014. And that experience just totally changed everything about my life, and including what I wanted to do with my career. So at first, it was just grieving, how do I get through this? And then really starting to openly share his story, starting to share my story, starting to go on this whole healing journey for myself. And then as I was speaking more openly about it, I realized that so many other people were struggling too. And so I've thought to myself, how can I reach these people who are struggling, or the people that want to support those who are struggling and they don't know how to help? And that's sort of how the concept for Broglie Box was born. It was just this side project. I was like, let's send care packages out to people who are struggling. But all the items are fun and approachable and digestible. And then it just snowballed, like it just started taking off. And so that's kind of what launched me into the mental health space.
So cool.
I think the side
Oh,
hustle thing also into a company is really just such a great piece of wisdom for other aspiring founders to know that you can build your side hustle.
yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah.
And Julia, you have a co-founder with Broglie Box, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So it's me and my now husband, but at the time we were just dating, and we laughed because we're like, we really took this huge risk on starting a company together because it's definitely an up and down roller coaster journey, entrepreneurship, as you two know. And you have to have a very, very solid relationship with anyone that you go into business with. And so luckily for us, it worked out. We got married, but at the time we were just dating.
And now you're celebrating your first year anniversary. Congrats.
Yes.
That's super exciting.
Thank you.
So the first question we have for you is, I definitely went through all of your achievements and accomplishments on LinkedIn. But as you just mentioned, like what we don't see on there are the details around your personal experience with mental health. Is there anything that you feel comfortable sharing with us to give us a little bit more context around Broglie Box and Veza?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. It's interesting. I love that you asked this question because I was like, oh my gosh, like how can I incorporate that more into my LinkedIn, because it is such a special part of my journey and such an important part of my journey. So I was like, when I saw this question, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to go on and really like expand on it on my LinkedIn.
It really wasn't. It wasn't that it was missing. It was a way of asking you to share your story. No one should feel pushed or peer pressured into,
No, no, I'm saying like
telling their-
I want to. Yeah, I'm saying I want to. Like
Okay, good. Okay.
it's so interesting. Like whenever I was struggling in college and high school, like I didn't want to talk about it at all. And now I feel like it's all I talk about is like my diagnosis. So yeah, so I can share a little bit more about that. So for me, like it all started with anxiety. I would get these visceral reactions like out of nowhere where my stomach would be in knots, my heart would be racing out of nowhere. I was having trouble breathing. I experienced a series of panic attacks all through high school and college. And then I like to say this giant cloud of sadness rolled in out of nowhere. And it was extremely I had these feelings of guilt because I was like, how can someone like me who seems to I have it all, like I have nothing, like why am I experiencing this? I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be. And that honestly just further made everything worse. And when it comes to like work, I mean, I was working for a huge company and did not want anyone to know what I was going through because I thought this is going to affect my career. But what most people don't realize is, like you can have a mental health condition and be excellent at your job. Like like one doesn't affect the other. But at the time, like I really was like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm not capable of doing the job that I was hired for just because of my anxiety diagnosis or my depression diagnosis. And so it took me a long time to sort of understand that for myself. And so now I talk really openly about it to other people. Of course, these things can affect your entire life, whether you like, if you don't ever get the help that you deserve. So yeah, I want to talk more about it on my LinkedIn because I think it's so important for other people to realize that, you know, we all, whether or not you have a mental health diagnosis or not, we all have mental health. And most people think it's like you're perfectly healthy or you're mentally ill and that's it. And that's not the case. Like there's a spectrum and that can change every day, every week. And whether or not you're going to have a mental health diagnosis or not, like we're human and we're all going to have life experiences that affect our mental health. And it's what we're doing every single day to build mental resilience to help get us through those moments. It's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does it mean to be a mental health advocate?
Yeah, I love this question. I think being a mental health advocate is different for everybody. There's not like a one size fits all. But for me personally, and like I said, I used to not speak about my own mental health struggle at all. But now, you know, I talk very openly about it. And that was what mental health advocacy meant for me. So it's sharing my story so that these things become less stigmatized. You know, so many people said to me when I started speaking openly, like, you're so brave. You're so brave to share your story and to just put it all out there. And for me, like, I can't wait for the day to come where it's not me being brave. I'm just being honest. Because these are facts. And just like if I broke my arm, if I said my arm's broken and someone say, "Oh my God, you're so brave to share that with the world," like we don't do that for physical health, right? So for me, it's really sharing my story so that others feel less alone. Advocating for my, you know, my brother who's not here to share his story anymore. And you know, he was 24 when he died and so young. He had the entire world ahead of him, and I'm sick and tired of hearing stories about other people going through the same thing. I mean, someone dies by suicide every 40 seconds in the world, and to me, it's just completely unacceptable on so many levels. And so, the more I can speak openly about my struggle, maybe helps someone else reach out for help and get the help they need.
Yeah, that stat is totally shocking. Um, I'm sad that we're still there, but
Yeah.
it's so great that we have role models like you trying to change that number. So you talked to us a little bit about Broglie Box. We'd love to hear more. What's the nitty gritty? How does it work, and how has it evolved since its launch?
Yeah. So, okay, so coming from like this cosmetics industry, subscription boxes were huge. And so that's sort of how I got the idea because I was like, well, what if there was a subscription box for mental health? And so what we did is we interviewed psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, social workers, like all these people from the mental health space. And we asked them, like, what else do you recommend to people outside of therapy? Because not that this is a replacement for that at all, but how do we support someone every single day outside of like medical treatment? And then what I also did is I sat in these Facebook groups, like anxiety support groups, and listened to what other people were recommending to each other. And that's how we came up with what we call the 6 pillars of mental wellness. So they're mindfulness, gratitude, relaxation, sleep, nutrition, and fitness. And so the subscription box, we said, all right, let's pull from those 6 categories different fun items that can go in a box. And so when we talk about the evolution of the company, we actually pivoted during COVID. We got rid of subscription because we had an overwhelming demand for on demand, meaning companies or people would say, I want to build my own box. I want to choose my products and I want to send it. I don't want to sign up for a subscription. I want to know exactly what's going in the box. I want to send it to someone. If 99% of the time it's sent as a gift for someone else. And then we had all these companies especially during the pandemic, come in and say, I want you to curate something for my employees. And I don't want that to be subscription. I want it to be like a one-time thing, or the one-time thing here, and then next year I'm going to order a new set of products. So now we're entirely on demand. You can build your own box of products, or we have pre-curated boxes as well.
That's so cool. But was it difficult to make that pivot? I think there's something around having to change your whole business model from, I guess, subscription is something where it's like, it's very paced, and then on demand is, I'm sure you have orders flying in from everywhere. I mean, Alexa and I kind of understand this journey as well. We're moving to a more on-demand world as well. And so it's taking a lot of feedback and implementing right away. So how was that for you?
Yeah, so I think all these decisions, it's so important. And you mentioned listening to feedback. Like for us, it was like it didn't really matter what we wanted. Like in terms of the business model. Like as long as we're achieving our mission and helping people with their mental health, like how that happens didn't matter to us. And we just had overwhelming requests for this one particular thing. And so we said to ourselves, like, why aren't we doing that? If that's all people are asking for, we're
Yeah.
limiting the growth of the company if we try to pigeonhole and keep in this one model that the people aren't really like, attaching themselves to. So yeah, just listening to a lot of feedback and really growing with your community, I think is so important. So just yeah, taking what they're saying into consideration and then making a switch. I mean, anything is difficult, but we made it through.
And for the entrepreneurs in our audience here, how are you creating brand awareness? Is it word of mouth? Are you doing ads? Just curious how people are finding out about you and coming to you for exactly what they need.
Yeah, so when we started, this was a totally bootstrapped company. We did not have any money for ads or anything like that. So when we first started, it was really like word of mouth. And then as we continued to grow, we started, especially during the pandemic, we started running some Google ads, and that's really where like the corporate orders started coming in. We also were so lucky we applied for this FedEx small business grant, and we won a bronze award for that. And having that, it was a cash prize, but it also kind of helped get the word out there a little bit more about us. And we took that money and put it into some advertising, which really helped. But it's so interesting, like, especially during the pandemic, we would get emails from people saying, like, my sister got this box from her company and she just couldn't stop talking about it. And so I want it for my company. So I recommended it to my HR manager. And then they said, like, okay, like go ahead and get pricing and stuff. So it was a lot of that actually, where
That's
people just
fantastic.
loved it and shared it, which we're so grateful for.
I think
That's
referrals, word of mouth is such a authentic way to build any brand.
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
So you and I have chatted about this a little bit, and I know you're kind of in stealth mode, but what's Veza?
Yeah. So because I was working so closely with many companies for Broglie Box, I started learning about what other offerings employers were offering to their employees. Um, and it was interesting. Like I've had so many conversations with people at organizations that need further mental health resources at their company, and they just don't know what to do. They're trying to like check a box because they know they need to support employee mental health, but there's a lot of gaps there. So we're actually we're building an entire online digital platform to help assess and support employee mental health. So like first and foremost, like accurately assess how are my employees doing, and being able to make data driven decisions on benefit packages because of that.
That's so exciting and so needed. How does it feel to be running two companies, two startups
Well,
at the same time?
yeah, it's so fun. No, I'm so blessed in so many ways. But Dustin, my husband, has pretty much taken over Broglie Box, taken the reins on Broglie Box. I'm still obviously involved, but it's so nice to have co-founders that you can lean on through any phase of life, whether you're starting another business or you're going through something in your personal life or, you know, whatever it might be. So he's sort of taken the reins on Broglie Box, and then I have co-founders with Veza as well. But it's interesting, like the balance. I'm so lucky though that you know, the our target demographic is very similar and our mission is very similar. So I think if I was doing something like totally outside of the mental health space or doing something like totally different, then that might be more overwhelming than it already is.
I'm just curious because so many of us have like growing and changing interests. How did you decide that now was the time to launch this, and decide like how you were going to sort of delegate and get the support that you needed or need? Like, what is the right time to pivot? A lot of our entrepreneurs always ask that.
So for the pivot that we did with Broglie Box, like I think that was really just, yeah, like listening to the community and kind of going from there. For Veza, it was like you know, there's this massive opportunity
Mm.
and it's sitting right there. And I, I'm also the kind of person like I've been thinking about this for so long, and at some point you just have to do. Like at some point you just have to say, I'm gonna go all in, I'm gonna try it and not be afraid. And I think like Alexa's the queen of, you know, fearlessness. And I think that, yeah, I was just like, I'm getting all these requests for this exact product. Like, why wouldn't I try to build this when I know that it's so needed? So I think just like following your intuition, we don't do that a lot. And so I think just really like taking time to sit with yourself and ask like, what do you want out of your career, or what do you want out of your life? Like, what is important to you? And for me, like, especially changing from chemical engineering to an entrepreneur in the mental health space, like I had to have like a hard conversation with myself on like, what do I really want? Because you spend so much of your time, so much of your day at work. And so you should be excited about what you're working on. Not, I mean, it's still work, it's always going to be work, but you should at least be like very excited about what you're doing. And so if you listen to that intuition, it should be an easy decision.
For sure. Anytime I need to like add something to my plate or take a risk or a leap like this, like I always ask myself, like how remiss or how disappointed in myself would I be if I just let this opportunity go?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think Alexa, you were going to say something.
I was gonna say, how do you stay positive even when you're trying to build something and you may be struggling with your own mental health?
Mm.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting question. I think that for me personally, I have this toolbox that I've built, like no pun intended with the Broglie box, but like, you know, I have this support system, and no matter what, like before I did any sort of mental health advocacy work or started working in the space, I was like, I need to like set myself up for success. And I always say to like companies, you know, your employees are your greatest asset. And I believe that to
Yeah.
be true in my own company as well. Like if I'm not well, my company is not going to be well. And so what, you know, I do all the things to support my own mental health to make sure that I'm in a good place so that I can be available to help others. And so yeah, like, you know, going to therapy and all the things that we recommend in the box are things that I'm doing to make sure. And again, like I'm not perfect. I still struggle with these things. I just have the tools in place that in the moments that I am struggling, I sort of have a plan on what to do in those moments.
Yeah.
A plan is so important.
So important. It's just like whenever I'm struggling, I immediately like default to what I know has worked in the past. Like if I need to reboot sessions with my therapist, if I need to reread a particular book, if I need to listen to these podcasts or meditate. So yeah, like having these tools as a backup is so important.
Yeah. I think I'll say one other thing too,
Yeah, for sure.
I don't feel bad about it anymore. I mean, of course, like the guilt part, like it's like if I'm having a bad day, I'm having a bad day. And so I think just allowing yourself to be like, hey, today's not so great. Like I'm gonna take today and just take today off and tomorrow's a new day. Whereas before it would be like this perpetual cycle of feeling bad and then feeling worse and then not actually feeling better because I would just go into this never ending cycle. So
Yeah.
have grace with yourself, I guess, is the number one thing if you're listening and you're struggling.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask you, like, how did you finally give yourself the permission to have grace and give yourself that break that you needed? Is it just like accumulation of like years of work, or was there like a switch?
No, I think it was accumulation of just years and years of work. And honestly, like I think it's the engineer in me. Like I'm like so like research driven and so literally like researching and talking and reading about people who have been through it really helped me because I was like, okay, I'm not alone. This is possible. These are things that have worked for other people. Like, what if I just try one of those things for myself? And
Yeah.
then trying multiple things over time, I think just helped, validate like, okay, like it's all right. I can do this. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
easy though.
Definitely not. I wanted to ask you about the shift that we saw in the importance of mental health in the workplace during COVID. I saw working for like a very large corporation, all of this sort of all of a sudden there was a lot of discussion and talk and resources being poured into um, employees who obviously were working from home, struggling with isolation. At the same time, we saw a resurgence of Black Lives Matter and the crisis with George Floyd, and there were sort of all these things that came to a head during COVID, which made companies aware that they needed to provide resources, support, education for their employees. What are the lasting impacts of all of this that you're seeing going forward, especially as you're building out Veza, this tool for companies and their employees?
Yeah, so I think this was the silver lining of COVID, right? Like that everyone started talking more openly about their mental health. And so, for years working in the mental health space, it was like just immediate blocks because of stigma would constantly happen. And because of COVID, now it was like this normalized or humanized thing where people were talking about it because everyone was experiencing these struggles in some capacity. So I think like in terms of the lasting effects, I would say that employees are now, expecting employers to put their money where their mouth is. So I think, um, you know, employers and companies are saying like, no, we care about you, we care about your mental health. And I think employees are really like demanding that and wanting to work for companies that prioritize their well-being. So I mean, I've spoken to a couple like HR managers that have told me that people will ask in interviews, like, what do you do at this company for employee mental health or employee well-being? Like, how do you as a company support the people that work for you? And I just thought that was so incredible because I mean, when I was interviewing for companies like back in the day, like out of college, like I never in a million years would have asked that question because the stigma was so bad. And so like that I feel like is just incredible. I'm so excited about that. And the other thing that I've seen, which I think we've all seen, is that remote work has lasted, or this like hybrid model. I mean, we've heard about the 4-day work week. So I think people are just really starting to think about their relationship with work. And I think that started in COVID.
Yeah, there was certainly, as I was interviewing right out of college, there was no way that you could ever ask, like, what does this company do for your work-life balance, even,
Yeah.
let alone mental health. And I remember after law school, interviewing with different law firms, and there were law firms that were like they would call them the work life law firms, meaning like they would have a bed in like an office where people could sleep, or they bring in food, which really meant like you were going to be there 24 hours, not that it was like supportive of a balanced work life. And then to get to a place where you're absolutely right, like um I interview people all the time in different capacities, and people do ask about the resources the company is going to provide for that work-life balance, for mental health, and just to keep them happy. I think there's been like a cultural shift, but it's also like a new generation of people coming in, a little bit on millennial side, but Gen Z definitely, like, these women, people know what they want, and aren't afraid to ask for it. So it's really cool to see, and it's interesting to see how companies are trying to meet that demand.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what are some of the hot topics that you're seeing in mental health in the workplace these days?
Yeah, I think, just like we mentioned, mental health is front and center. I think it's starting to become like infused or embedded into culture, which is really exciting. Another hot topic I would say is there was this phase of like wellness washing that was happening at companies where it's like, oh, like we're gonna do this, but like we don't actually, like, it's like a way to check a box or and say like, oh, we're doing all these wellness things, but then the policies don't support employee mental health, or like, we're going to give you mental health days, but you better not take them, like, so it's like, like whenever the environmental stuff happen, not environmental stuff happen, but whenever like environmental topics started becoming bigger, or more pronounced, like there was this term like greenwashing that was happening. And so I like to say, like, I think wellness washing is starting to, like, people are starting to call it out. Like, okay, this is a little bit of wellness washing. So that's like a big trend that I've seen. Another one is that people are starting to get like smarter, or mental, or therapists and mental health professionals are starting to really like target misinformation. So social media diagnoses happen all the time. Like, my friends that are mental health doctors will tell me, someone will come in and be like, well, I watched this TikTok video and I know that this is my diagnosis based on the things that this person was saying. And so like, and I think that happens at work as well. So I think like that is something that a lot of mental health professionals are looking to combat, and say like, okay, like it's okay to talk about your story, but maybe not match your symptoms to someone else, because you really need a diagnosis from a mental health professional. We talked about this a little bit already, but the 4-day work week is like a huge
Mm.
trend that I'm just like hearing about all over the place. Like, and people are so polarized in how they feel about it. It's so interesting, like such an interesting topic to bring up to people, because people are so opinionated about it one way or the other. So yeah, like I would say those are like the big topics. Oh, the other one is like funding. So
Mm.
I think it was like $4.5 billion went into funding mental health related startups in 2021. And so that trend continues where like, these people are like looking for solutions, and really like evidence-based solutions. I would
Yeah.
say those are like the hot topics.
In the investment world, just sort of like medical tech and mental health tech is huge right now. I'm curious, on the 4-day work week, do you see companies actually moving towards this, and how are they approaching it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we'll get there eventually, but some companies are just like very afraid. It's just like remote work. I think, you know, like, when COVID happened and everybody went to remote, companies were shocked at how employees could continue to be productive or sometimes even more productive at home. And so I think it's going to be a little like guess and check situation. I know a lot of companies do like summer Fridays. So maybe those companies will be the ones that transition to a four week work day or work week before others.
I'm crossing my fingers. I love the idea. Alexa, maybe we could model that out at Grasshopper.
Agreed.
So when asked, what type of workplace resources do you suggest people look into? I know you and I had a prior conversation where we talked about employee resource groups. We talked about having sort of like an ombudsman or someone who could be there as an anonymous resource for people to kind of speak their minds and confide in. There's companies funding telehealth services, sort of beefing up their insurance packages so that it covers mental health. Like what are you suggesting that people look into if somebody was to go into an interview and say, like, look, employer, like what do you have for us? What are some of those resources?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people don't even realize what their company has to offer, and I think at this point, like you said, most companies offer mental health resources, but unfortunately, like because of communication issues or whatever, like it doesn't like people don't always realize what they have. I spoke to someone who I I knew for a fact that their company offered 5 free therapy sessions per issue, and they were like, "Yeah, my company doesn't offer me anything," and I was like, oh, like, actually, like, I think and I, like, told him about this research because I'd spoken to their people ops manager, and then they looked into it and they were like, "You're right, like, I had no idea we even offered this." So, I think first and foremost, just asking the question, HR is there to answer those specific type of questions, so don't be afraid to ask what your company offers. Employee resource groups can be an incredible resource. Like you mentioned, a lot of companies have mental health related ERGs and they do, peer support groups or it can just be that person that you go to and you say like, hey, I need some extra help. Like, what does this company offer to help me? Also, like I always like to say, like, call your insurance company because they might be able to direct you to resources. But honestly, like I would say if you are working at a company and you are in an employee resource group, having some sort of directory that you can offer to people to say, like, if someone comes to you and says, like, what do I do? I'm struggling. Having something that's like condensed and all in one would be really helpful to give to employees or HR managers. I say that too. I'm like, having them like asking the question sometimes is so hard for people. Like, how do I get help? Or like, I'm struggling. So, like, taking that part of it off the plate for them and just saying like, here's the resources if you ever need it and making it so loud and so clear so that people don't have to like take that extra step is really helpful. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask. But also I would say like if you're an HR manager, like make the resources a little bit more obvious for people.
You're right. Often they are there. They're just sort of so buried in everything that needs to get said and done during onboarding that it sort of falls by the wayside. And it's only when you're in crises or you need something that you have to start looking into it. And that task feels so big. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Just having like a digest would be super helpful.
Yeah. And I will say to anyone who is struggling out there, so 988 is a 24-hour free crisis text and call line that you can text into or call, and you get connected to a crisis counselor. So if you're someone out there, and even if you're not struggling, like I would recommend just adding that to your phone because when you're in crisis, as you mentioned, like asking for help or figuring out the resource, like it feels so much harder. So just write that down so you have it.
So what is
988.
it? 9 and 8?
988.
988. I did not know
Yeah.
that. So thank you for
Yeah.
that. All right, we'll
It's
put
like the mental health 911, basically.
amazing. Um, just writing that down for us. Thank you. Okay. I was really inspired by one of your LinkedIn posts. I think you were speaking at a high school and you sort of recapped the experience. And then at the bottom, you said, what I really love about my job is really revisiting, providing or supporting hope and healing. And so I just wanted to ask you, like, what are the tips for hope and healing?
Yeah, so we can go through them. We can start with
Yes.
hope.
Yeah.
So this hope reminders vision board that I was telling you about, like, I think like we mentioned, like when you're struggling, it's so hard to just sometimes even do like the simplest of tasks. And so I think if you have this collection that's pre-made of when you're feeling well, and it's maybe like quotes or just pictures, people, or and like even like I have this like sunset picture that just literally I look at it and I feel calm. So I would say like create this like reminders vision board that you can look to whenever you're starting to feel like you're struggling with hope. The next one is find an anchor, and that's basically like a grounding exercise that keeps you here. So it could be anything. It could be a candle. It could be like I have this like worry stone, gemstone, and I grab that. It could be a person. So maybe it's like a person that you call. And finding an anchor is so important because again, like when you're struggling and you're like grasping for something, like an anchor can just keep you grounded, not snap you out of it, but like get you back into the moment so that you can continue. Write a letter to yourself. I love this one because again, like when you're struggling, like you don't know who to listen to, you maybe not feel like you don't have anyone, like write a letter to yourself that you can read back whenever you're feeling like you need an extra bit of hope, and just encourage yourself. List your strengths, like list what you love about yourself. It's a really hard exercise to do actually, but whenever you're feeling down, if you read that letter, it can be super impactful. And then just the knowledge that you've already survived 100% of your worst days. I think I tell this to myself, like every bad day is just 24 hours. And I've got my success rate of getting through every bad day is 100%. So I'm still here. And so reminding yourself of that can be really impactful. And then tips for healing. So unsilence your pain. This is something I struggled with for years. I just buried my pain. I shoved it down, and if you've ever experienced this, you know that it just doesn't go away. Like it continues to bubble up and continues to worsen over time. And so what I like to tell people is it's so important to unsilence your pain and not hide in that pain anymore. Um, and the reason is because your pain matters. Like your pain matters simply because you do. And so no matter what you're going through, even if you think like, well, it's not as bad as someone else, so I'm not going to talk about it, like none of that. Um, in that vein, like healing is not linear. I mean, I've gone on this long healing journey, but it's been up and down. And there are moments where I feel back to square one in my grief, or I feel completely overwhelmed by my anxiety disorder. But the difference is, like we mentioned, like I don't feel bad. I don't feel so bad about it anymore. I just give myself grace and I say, you know what, this is part of the journey. And tomorrow is a new day. Um, Eliminate should from your vocabulary. So I think so much like in the wellness space, we say like, oh, well, you should be eating this, or you shouldn't be doing that, or you should be going to therapy, or you should be like none of that. Like do what works for you and figure out what that is and then do that. And then don't make yourself feel bad if you're not doing it as consistently as you would hope. Like, small steps are still steps in the right direction. So I like to say like completely eliminate should. It's the worst. It's the worst word in the vocabulary.
But it's the
And then
hardest one
it
to
is
get
hard.
rid of. And even if you're not saying it out aloud, like the way that you talk to yourself, I don't know if you experience this, but I'm always like, oh, I should be thinking this way, or I shouldn't have done this, or, you know, beating yourself up and guilt around your decisions. It's very hard.
Yeah. One way that I've kind of combated that is like written it down, like, oh my God, like I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And then like literally like scratching it out. Like, I think it's like the physical scratching that really helps.
Yeah.
But it's you get better with anything over time, the more you do it. So, and then the last one is just build your own mental health toolbox. So, I mentioned that, Broglie Box is a physical toolbox, but you could do this on your own, even if it's not physical things. So for example, I actually have a note on my phone that is a to-do list of things to do whenever I'm feeling down. So like the number one thing is drink a glass of water. The second thing is go for a walk. The third thing is go get my dog and hug him. The fourth thing is to watch something funny or take a shower. So like I have this like go-to list of things that I do that I know make myself feel better. And I think thinking about that when you're actually like well is so important. So then you can reflect back on it whenever you're not feeling so good.
I love that. Being prepared.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this. And thank you for being a mental health advocate and for destigmatizing and for all the support that you provide in the two companies that you are building. You're really an inspiration. So thank you so much for chatting with our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good rest of the month.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.